Hello everybody, how are you doing? This is an apple. Pay attention to this apple. This apple will be important later on in the review. It's a gala apple in case you're curious. That's not really important, but what is important is the apple itself. Pay attention to this apple. Okay, good. All right, I'm gonna set it over here. All right then. We have a lot of stuff to cover today. We got science fiction, we dip into philosophy for a little bit, history is involved. This chapter has everything. One Piece, chapter 1062, The Adventure in the Land of Science, Science. I'm not going to add an effect in, I'm just going to do that echo. Alright, so this is like similar to every other chapter when we go to a new island, you know, like Adventure in the Land of Passion and Toys was Dressrosa, Adventure in the Land of Samurai, Adventure in the Land of a Desert Kingdom or whatever, you know, whenever the Straw Hats go to a new island and they're actually beginning to explore it like what happens here, Oda will name that chapter, you know, Adventure in the whatever place. So, I don't know, it's just a small little thing. These chapters, like the Adventure in, they always make me really excited and hyped. Like, okay, the Straw Hats are on a new island, it's a new arc, it's a new adventure, what kind of crazy, wacky characters are they gonna meet, what kind of enemies are they gonna have to face, you know, what new crazy developments are gonna occur in the story. So these chapters just do a great job of building the hype. We get the cover spread, and as I assumed, the Germa Double Six's emotionless incursion is not done yet. It seemed like everything was sort of wrapped up in a nice little bow in the last one, where, you know, Caesar got Oven and Katakuri super baked, and then the Germa all grabbed him and they got out of Whole Cake Chateau, they escaped Totland, and that was like maybe where they're at right now. But we have still yet to settle the whole situation. Who were the mysterious, shadowy individuals that showed up at Cacao Island way earlier in the cover series? I think Oda wanted us to think like a red herring that it was Reiju and Ichiji going to rescue Yonji and Niji, but that was clearly not the case, because we cut over to Cacao Island right now, and the entire island is frozen over, like super solid, like frozen chocolate, which is still pretty good. Have you ever tried putting chocolate Pop-Tarts in the freezer? They're delicious, okay? Anyway, this is confusing. I'm gonna have to call Detective Tekking for this one. Okay. Somebody that's in the new world that arrived at Cacao Island that has the ability to freeze the entire island over seemingly in an instant. Who do we know in this story that has ice powers? Okay, we can figure this out, ladies and gentlemen, all right? We can get to this, all right? Who has ice powers? All right, Monet. It could have been Monet. Oh, wait, she's dead. Somebody could have gotten her devil fruit and done this. Brooke has ice powers. This could be Brooke. Let's not rule out Brooke here, okay? All right. Yamato could have just been like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay on Wano. You know what? I'm actually gonna... Actually, this takes place like a few weeks prior, so Yamato could have went back in time, which is not possible, but okay, it's probably not Yamato. Rukia, could have been Rukia, in preparation for the new Bleach anime coming out next week. It could have been her. Or, I guess it could have been Aokiji, I guess. That's sort of like a stretch for him. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it's most likely Aokiji. However, there was another person that arrived. So if it wasn't, you know, a bunch of ideas were thrown out. It could have been like Crocodile and Mr. One, or a Crocodile and Mihawk as they're part of the Cross Guild. Could have been members of Blackbeard's crew. It seems like everybody was wrong on this, and it's Aokiji, which is great because he has not been in this story for a very long time. The last time he was relevant was at Punk Hazard, which was over a decade ago. So it would be really nice to see Aokiji back again, but who was the mysterious individual with him? Could it have been Shiki? Could it have even have been Wang Ji? We do not know. By the way, you still paying attention to the apple? Okay, it's not time yet. Just wanted to, you know, bring that up. Okay, so that's the cover story. Aokiji showed up at Totland, froze over the entire island. Why? To what end? The citizens there seem rather upset and perturbed by that, being frozen solid to the ground and their entire island frosted over, so Aokiji seems to maybe want something in Totland and also wants to keep the citizens quiet. He just arrives and he's just like, Ice Age. Alright, now we can look for it. You know, maybe he's looking for the Poneglyph. Maybe he's trying to find Laugh-Tale. Who knows? I don't know. What's going on? Also, man marked by flames, Aokiji is covered in scars from the magma from his fight with Akainu at Punk Hazard, so he is a candidate for man marked by flames, so we'll see where that goes. Alright, well with that being said, we jump around a lot in this chapter, but we start off outside of Egghead Island in the ocean. It's still snowy, it's very cold out, where the giant mecha robo has lifted up the Thousand Sunny out of the water, saving the Straw Hat crew so they're not drowning anymore. They're all still on the ship, and we see the individual step out of the robots, like, pilot center or whatever, and announces herself as Vegapunk. We just have a moment where Frankie just fanboys out, which I love. I love this, okay? So Frankie does not even stop to think, like, okay, Vegapunk is always referred to as, like, an old man, and he's been doing this for, like, decades and decades. Here's a young lady walking out of the robot like, I'm Dr. Vegapunk. How are you doing, you stupid pirates? You know, she is a little bit, like, she has an attitude to the Straw Hat. She's clearly not indicating herself as an ally, but she does talk like an old man. Anyway, so as soon as she announces herself as Dr. Vegapunk, Frankie goes like, oh man, Vegapunk, super! I've been waiting to meet you forever! I hung out at your homeland for like 2 years! I crashed at your pad! You know what I mean? I killed 2 years working in your laboratory. Man, this is great. And you know what's insane? Something that Frankie brings up is, I was living in your laboratory for 2 years. I didn't even get a chance to look at everything, which is insane. And keep in mind, that was the technology Vegapunk was working on way back in his younger years, okay? And so, by the way, this will make sense as we find out in this chapter there. Okay, spoiler alert. Vegapunk has a bunch of robot assistants, okay? I think that's something a lot of people could have arrived at. She's not even the only one, but they do have individual names. So, from actually, all the ones that we see in this chapter confirmed are women, and then I guess Vegapunk himself is a guy. There's a one that we don't really get to see too well, and then there's others that we just see their names of, okay? But we'll see. We'll explore that as we go. But they are individual characters in their own rights. They're not like all robots like controlled by Vegapunk like a puppet, like they actually have like, he basically created sentient AI is essentially what Vegapunk did. This chapter's insane. Anyway, so Vegapunk's there, and Frankie's freaking out, and Usopp's freaking out. They're all freaking out like, oh my god, giant robot, this is incredible, right? So Frankie kind of developed sort of like a role model like position for Vegapunk in his head. He never really talked about Vegapunk before the Straw Hats got separated, okay? He always looked up to Tom, because he built the sea train and everything, and Frankie has always had an aptitude for building like cyborgs and battle Frankies and modifying himself and everything like that. It's still one of the most amazing feats ever that Frankie, while he was like mortally wounded by being hit by a damn freight train, he was able to pull himself together on a scrap metal island and like, I need to repair myself. Like Frankie has to have surgical skills that rival Law in order to maybe do that, but whatever, that's a discussion for another day. What's important to bring up is that Frankie says, I lived on, Baltimore for 2 years. I actually blew it up. Funny story. But he doesn't say that. Actually, I want to see this. I want to see the interaction between Vegapunk and the actual Vegapunk and Frankie, and have Frankie be like, yeah, the nightmare at Baltimore? That was me! I set off a nuke and blew up half the island. Woo! Superman! But your lab could take it because you're awesome. He didn't even get a chance to look at every single piece of, technology that Vegapunk developed, mostly because half of it was blown away in the aforementioned nuke. But he's like, oh, I was focused on laser technology and modifications to the cyborg stuff. There was a lot of other stuff, probably like his beginning research on the human genome and the lineage factor that Frankie just never had a chance to discuss. I'm imagining at Baltimore in the lab, there were probably mountains and mountains of notes and like research papers and math and everything, and Frankie was like, I don't have time to go over all this. I need to build a freaking Megazord, because he only had 2 years to work with. He had to get back to the Straw Hats, right? So that's insane right there. So most of the Straw Hats, like Brooke and Frankie, they're all freaking out. Usopp as well, they're freaking out. Keep in mind, Chopper, Luffy, they're not, and Jinbei are not with them. They're on the actual island itself, okay? Sanji, of course, is freaking out for another reason because, an attractive lady in a skin-tight bodysuit just walked out of a giant robot. So, Frankie, Usopp, Brooke, they're kind of more impressed by the robot. Sanji's more impressed by the lady, So they're freaking out. Then we have Robin, and I love Robin. Robin's there, and she's ready to fight, okay? She raises up her hands with the Hana Hana no Mi. She's, like, ready to go, and she's like, This doesn't seem right. I've never met Vegapunk myself, but number one, he's always been referred to as a man. I've never heard him referenced as a woman. And number two, he's been active for years and years, decades. And this woman is way too young. She's like in her 20s. Okay, this doesn't make any sense for him to be, or her to be Vegapunk, right? And so I love this, Robin. You need to be a One Piece YouTuber. You need to be a One Piece theory YouTuber. I think she would be good at this, because that's pretty much the same talking points everybody had for the last 2 weeks, summed up in 2 speech bubbles by Robin. Nah, this doesn't make sense. Something's going on here. I sense shenanigans. Okay, and Zoro's also there, and he's, by the way, he doesn't have a shirt on. I guess he lost it when the ship got knocked overboard. So Zoro's there just bare-chested, shirtless in the middle of this blizzard, just readying his swords, just like, you know, it's like, I don't know about this, okay? So, her name is Lilith, I'll just say, because, yeah, we find out here in this bubble anyway. So Lilith mentions, like, you thought I was the main body, the Stella body? Stella! Streetcar Named Desire reference, anybody get that? Okay, whatever. Anyway, so Lilith mentions, no, I am Vegapunk number 2, and she, like, moves her jacket aside and, like, points to the logo that we saw last time, where it says Punk 02. And she's like, you know, oh, you thought I was the main body. No, I'm number 2, Lilith, okay? And so, yes, she is a robot copy clone of Vegapunk. We're gonna find out later in the chapter that he is so busy that he basically made other bodies he calls satellites in order for them to, like, make the main operations of the island. Like, they each have different tasks. This one seems to be, Lilith's tasks seem to be, like, security around the island, mobilize, capture various ships that reach Egghead and everything like that are pirates. And from what she also indicates is just like, we go through research funds on this island in a jiffy. So therefore, we're gonna have to capture you pirate crews and take all of your treasure. All right? So that seems to be her job. Her job is like, oh, you know, we need research funding for everything on Egghead, you know, although it's funny that you don't get, like, government grants or anything like that. You know, the Tenryubito are so loaded and they're so interested in what Vegapunk has to offer. Remember, Vegapunk was making giant, like, dragons on Punk Hazard at the behest of the Tenryubito. You think the Tenryubito would have an interest of funding everything, but they still need money, I guess. So they're just like, okay, so yeah, we're gonna capture all these pirate ships and we're gonna take all their treasure. This also goes in line with what Lilith said in the last chapter when the shark, the giant robot shark, was, like, devouring the ships. Lilith was like, hey, quit doing that. You keep eating the ships. I don't have time to, like, go through all of their stuff, okay? So she is clearly not a good person here. She's clearly trying to rob the Straw Hats. So Nami actually has a good counter to that. Nami's like, hey, lady, it's already cold enough out here without you being cold trying to steal our treasure, all right? I love that. That's a great rebuttal to this whole conversation, right? And so, Lilith is like, hey, wait a second, this is not a request, you know, I'm literally going to steal all of your gold, you know, you really, this is a holdup, basically, this is a robbery, you really have no say in this, okay? And so with that being said, she says, escaping from this land is nigh impossible, no one just sails into this area, and at the snap of her fingers, a bunch of mechanized sea beasts emerge from the water around the Thousand Sunny and the robot. So the robot still has the Sunny captive, so the Sunny can't just fly away. I mean, they could try to use Kude Burst, but maybe the robot just might be like, whoa, get back over here, you know, something like that. But anyway, we have giant mechanized sea beasts. Now, keep in mind, sea beasts are a different species from sea kings, okay? We actually see them during Fishman Island. Hammond and his crew kind of were, like, riding on the sea beasts outside of Fishman Island that kind of met the Straw Hats there. So, sea beasts take the appearance of, like, mammals, except they're sea beasts. So, Momu is actually a perfect example of this. Momu was the first sea beast that we actually got to see in the story, way back in the Arlong Park arc, okay? So, Momu was a cow sea beast, all right? So, it was like a cow, but, like, aquatic. We also see a giraffe, a rhinoceros, I think a gorilla, you know, we saw a sea rabbit at one point in the story. So that's basically just Oda taking mammals and, like, incorporating them with gills and fins and stuff. So here we see a sea beast, a lion, we see a bull, we see a wolf, we see a reindeer. Oh, but Chopper's not around, so I guess they can't have a conversation. We see another giraffe. These actually, some of these sea beasts might be the same sea beast we saw at Fishman Island. Like, we saw a sea giraffe at Fishman Island. This might be the same sea giraffe that was captured by Vegapunk or Lilith and modified into a mechanized sea beast. We see a sea raccoon and we see a sea bear. A sea bear? Oh my god, we gotta draw our anti-sea bear circles in the dirt. I don't have a sombrero. I'm out of cheese. Wait, I do have cheese. Oh my god, it's only cubed. Oh wait, it was cubed. I have cubed. All right, we're good. All right. So yeah, we have a sea bear, the Straw Hats. Oh man, I don't know if they're gonna be able to face that. Okay. Now, at the aspect of being attacked from all sides by an army of sea monsters that are also decked out with armor and laser cannons probably, and they could probably fly and all that shit. Same thing with the sea shark or whatever. Although the sea shark wasn't a mammal, it was really just a shark that was modified with robot stuff. Frankie is still so surprised. He's just like, you know, he should be like readying the cannons and like laser beams and stuff. Like, we gotta fight. Frankie's just like, oh my god, a giant army of sea beasts that are mechanized. Vegapunk, you're so cool. Now, Usopp, I love Usopp here, because Usopp was just as surprised, like, whoa, a giant robot, that's so cool. Oh, a giant army of sea beasts. So Usopp is kind of going back and forth. He's like in flux right now between like, oh my god, this is so cool. Oh my god, we're all gonna die, but it's so cool, but I don't know about this. So it's like the fear is beginning to overtake his awe. So that's really funny. Zoro's there just glaring down the sea raccoon, just like, what do you want? Now, remember, Zoro has Conqueror's Haki now, and they might be mechanized sea beasts. They're still sea beasts, and this was actually something brought up in the last chapter, I think that was relevant. Lilith mentioned, no matter what I do with the modifications with their cyborg technology, I cannot remove innate nature. That was the reason why the shark kept trying to eat everything, because that was following the shark's like primal nature. Vegapunk keeps trying to remove that factor, but he can't, or, you know, Lilith couldn't, okay? So that indicates Conqueror's Haki, a burst from Zoro, might actually scare the shit out of these things, and they might all leave. Overriding, like, error, flee, and then they, like, run away. Like, it overrides their cybernetic enhancements on their brain, and, like, primal fear takes over, and Zoro might be able to conquer his Haki and clear all this up very quickly, alright? So just keep that in mind there. Nami and Brook are freaking out, of course. They're like, oh my god, giant sea monsters, we're all gonna die! It's at this point that Lilith receives a call on her, I don't know if this is actually part of her body or if it's just a headphone, might be, whatever. She starts to receive a message from another one of Vegapunk's bodies. This one is named Shaka, and we actually see its body number 1. Okay, so you would assume if we're going in line, Vegapunk created 1 first, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6. You would assume that Shaka is the one that maybe has the highest rank, if there is a rank between them, if they actually have to follow orders, like, you know, 6 is the lowest on the rung, and then, you know, 6 has to take orders from everybody, and then 1 is at the highest that maybe only takes orders from the Dr. Vegapunk, the Stella body himself, okay? So Shaka is number 1. We don't really get to see what he looks like. You would just see him from behind. We see a helmet, so we don't really know his body. But he mentions he's logic. He's the logic part. Each members of these satellites, of these different bodies, sort of embody a different aspect. So Shaka is logic. Lilith just is listed as evil later on, so Lilith is just the evil one, which kind of ties back to Lilith's origin. Just really quick on that, okay, I'm just gonna warn you right now, there's gonna be a lot of tangents in this one, okay, because there's a lot of references to, like, history and science and philosophers and things like that. So Lilith is obviously named after Lilith, a character, I think the origin of her actually came way back in, like, Mesopotamia, in, like, Sumerian culture, like, way far back. I think the most famous example of Lilith is in Jewish mythology, where it's mentioned that she was, like, the alternate first woman that was created by God, so it usually goes Adam, and then out of Adam's rib was created Eve. In this case, Lilith was created. I don't think Lilith was created from Adam's rib, though, and so it was Adam and Lilith but then Lilith refused to comply or like listen to orders or whatever, so she was like banished. And there's a lot of different like ways to look. Like Lilith becomes like a first like monster or a devil or a demon. There's a lot of like modern fiction that depicts Lilith, like Lilith was the first vampire, you know, stuff like that, you know, things of that nature, right? So it would make sense why Vegapunk gave her the code name Evil, because given the backstory and stuff. I think there's stuff that goes back to like the Akkadian Empire with her, like so it's really old kind of like mythology and history stuff. Although I think in the actual Jewish Bible, she's only mentioned like once or twice. Like it's not like she's a prominent character in the actual Jewish Bible. It's just more of like stuff like way back in the day, like mythology and stuff, and even maybe before Judeo teachings existed. You know what I mean? Like way far back. Okay, like Sumerians were like one of the first civilizations ever, like kind of contemporary with Old Kingdom Egypt or like pre-dynastic Egypt. So we're talking about a long ass time ago. So that's just Lilith right there. Okay. Well, anyway, Shaka comes on and explains like, Lilith, are you an idiot? You know who you're sticking up right now, right? You know who you're robbing right now, right? That's the Straw Hat crew, Lilith. That's a brand new Yonko crew that you are dealing with right now. And Lilith is just like, she kind of just smirks and she's like, well, of course I know that. That must mean they have a lot of treasure on their ship. And Shaka is just like, Lilith, you're an idiot. Lilith, open your eyes really quick and look at that damn boat right now. And Lilith's like, what? It's like, do you not see the green-haired man that's topless with the sword? It's like, yeah, that's Pirate Hunter Zoro. He has a bounty of 1,111,000,000, and you are in his range right now. He could kill you 5 times before you hit the ground. Do you also see that woman over there with the black hair that has her arms up that looks like she's about to summon a bunch of hands and break your spine? That's because that's Nico Robin, and she can do that. And so Lilith is kind of just like, you got surprised because all these other idiots were there. Like Frankie was like, oh my god, look at all this. Usopp's like, this is incredible. Sanji's like, oh, hello, beautiful lady. And then you got lulled into a false sense of security by these idiots. A true person of logic will examine, the most dangerous people first, and you did not do that, Lilith. So Lilith begins to have a little bit of a freak out moment because she looks at Zoro, and I'm sure she knows who Zoro is. It just didn't cross her mind immediately. And then she sees Robin, and then Lilith is just like, oh, that's not good. Yeah, and so then you have a moment where Zoro, with his hand on Enma, like he's about to quick draw, he's about to go. He's like, hey, Vegapunk, there's something I want from you, so you'd better play nice. Got it? Okay, and we end the scene there, but Lilith seems to be that she seems to realize she's in an issue because giant robot aside, giant sea beasts aside, with Zoro and Frankie and Brooke and Nami and Robin and everybody there, that set of Straw Hats, I think they can deal with this problem. I honestly think a burst from Conquerors would be enough to scare off the sea beasts, and then Zoro could easily, like as Shaka said, a single from Zoro could probably cut her in half. Now, she's a robot, so we might actually play around with this where it's like, remember like way back in like the G.I. Joe cartoon and like cartoons in the 80s where it's like robot soldiers could be destroyed all the damn time and it doesn't matter because they're not really humans, right? We might have this in this arc where these robots might get sliced up all the time. Zoro might just slice Lilith in half and it's just like, oh, darn it. And then it's just like, okay, she could just be like, pasted back together or repaired or whatever, and it's not a big deal. Okay, so that might actually happen a few times. So Zoro wants to talk to Vegapunk about something. Now, it could just be like, it's like, hey, where's our captain? Where's Luffy or whatever? It could just be that. But I'm trying to think of like something else that Vegapunk would want to bring up. That Zoro would want to bring up to Vegapunk. I'm trying to think of anything that's really connecting Zoro to Vegapunk right now. And obviously, I will be making follow-up videos to all this stuff later this week. There's a lot to unpack with this chapter, like a lot, okay? So I don't want to stick too long on any given moment, but I just can't immediately think of anything. Like, okay, Vegapunk is connected to the world government. World government's connected to the Marines. Is there anything in particular that Zoro would want to talk to about the Marines? And that leads me to like, okay, well, Zoro knows Tashigi. Zoro was at Punk Hazard. Maybe he wants to ask a question about, like, what the deal with Punk Hazard was. Maybe he wants to ask about the dragons. You know, like, Zoro's like, all right, hold on a second. I got something serious I need to talk to Vegapunk about. It's like, oh, what? Why would you make dragons? Why are you making dragons? You know, like, maybe that might be it. I really don't know, because Zoro at Wano, he heard the legend of Ryuma, and Ryuma slayed the... Oh, that makes sense. Okay, so we did not get to see Zoro visit Ryuma's grave, but I still think he did that. It was just maybe Oda will reveal that later in a flashback. What if Zoro went to go visit Ryuma's grave, and what if Tenguyama went with him, or Izo? Well, Izo's dead, so Izo was there, he just wasn't alive. Maybe Kinemon went with him. Somebody went with him, right? Maybe Hiyori went with him. And, you know, Zoro's there paying respects to Ryuma's grave, paying respects to the Shusui. His body's no longer there, but his sword is. And so maybe at that point, Tenguyama told the whole story of Ryuma. Like, ah, yes, the story of Ryuma. You know, he slayed a dragon way back in antiquity or whatever. And maybe Zoro was like, he slayed a dragon? I slayed a dragon. And Tenguyama might have been like, impossible. They all died out hundreds of years ago. I'm like, no, I slayed a dragon on Punk Hazard. It was like, you know, a couple months back. And Tenguyama's like, that doesn't make any sense. All dragons died. What if somebody's making dragons? And then maybe Zoro was like, that Vegapunk guy might have been making dragons. That might actually be the connection here, because I really am drawing blanks on anything else. Okay, so anyway, let me know if you have any other ideas, but let's just roll with this. Okay, so we do get to see Shaka. He wears like a Kamen Rider Super Sentai Power Ranger helmet, and we only see the back of the helmet. We don't even see the front of it. So, you know, Dr. Vegapunk, #1, logic. Okay, so he represents the logic. He represents the, like, okay, Lilith, you're an idiot. That's clearly Zoro. That's clearly Robin. She can kill you. You know what I mean? So just be careful with that. You know, and so also Shaka brings up, hey, bring them here. I have interest in that crew. He doesn't say Vegapunk is interested in the crew. He says, I have interest in the crew. It's still a little bit up in the air if these bodies reference themselves as a whole. It doesn't seem like they do, because Lilith mentioned, oh, the main body, the Stella body. I'm Lilith, not the main body. So it seems like, yeah, they have enough sentience and, like, autonomy to be aware that, like, it was like, we are all Vegapunk. We are all... It's not like a... It's sort of similar to Pain from Naruto, where Pain had the main body of Nagato and then the other bodies, but those other bodies talked in like we, you know, we are Pain, you know, stuff like that. These bodies seem to be more individuals, you know, and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah. So that's the first scene of the chapter. Now we cut away back down to the cave where we see Luffy, Chopper, Jinbei, and Jewelry Bonnie, all right? So they're all dried off. The island's climate is much warmer. That was something that, like, once they actually got on the island, they can actually dry their clothes and they weren't, like, freezing. Yeah, so that's the situation. It's very warm here. So they're walking through this cave, which is more of like a mechanical sort of like tunnel. So they're walking through that, and they're just talking about, like, okay, Bonnie, why are you here right now? And Bonnie says, oh, I was actually here once when I was a little kid, but back then it was just a run-of-the-mill kind of laboratory on an island. It wasn't really anything in particular or special. It's nothing like this. It's crazy, right? And so Luffy or somebody asks her, you know, okay, well, why did you come back to this island then? And this is where we get not everything, but it's beginning to piece together. I believe Oda is going to sprinkle this throughout the arc as we learn more about Bonnie's relationship to Kuma. It is revealed here, though, that Kuma is Bonnie's father. Okay, so that's one piece of the mystery. Just keep it, and just we'll see where this goes. So Bonnie just basically says to the Straw Hats, Kuma is my father, and he was captured by the world government at one point, and he was modified into a cyborg. Now, Luffy and Chopper's reaction to that was like, whoa, your dad's a cyborg? That's so cool! Bonnie's reaction is, okay, yeah, it's really not. He literally has been turned into a thoughtless, emotionless monster, and every trace of my own father has been removed from his personality. He's literally someone that is just a murder machine for war and death. So no, Luffy, it's not kinda cool that my dad is a cyborg. And Luffy's just like, yeah, but he can fire lasers, right? I'm like, yes, he can fire lasers. Whoa, he can fire lasers! So yeah, okay, you have a choice between giving up your humanity or you can fire lasers. You can only have one, humanity or lasers. What do you pick, okay? Anyway, so yeah, we find out that Kuma is Bonnie's father. All right, so, because of Bonnie's devil fruit, I'm just going to call it the age fruit, because that's probably what it's called. She has the ability to change her age and the ages of other people, okay? We've seen her as a little kid, we've seen her as an adult right now, like in her 20s, where she usually is, and then we also see her as an old lady during Reverie. I was under the assumption that her original form was the old lady, because I thought like, oh, she's an old lady that ate the devil fruit and then returned to the prime of her youth and then went out to be a pirate. That's what I thought. Doesn't seem to be the case here. Kuma is her father. Now, Kuma's also had a lot of cybernetic shenanigans going on with him, so, you know, he might actually, well, we actually know his age. He's 47. I don't know if Oda will keep with that or if he'll change it at all, but Kuma's age is confirmed to be 47 years old. Bonnie mentions here that when I was a kid, and I don't believe she was like, oh, when I was a kid, you know, when I used my devil fruit. No, when she was like an actual kid, she visited this island like several years ago, and she mentioned that the island was very different back then than it is now. Okay, so definitely a passage of time has occurred here. So that would honestly probably put Bonnie's actual age at the age that she's usually, like, appearing as. Like, somewhere in the mid-20s. She could be a little older, you know, she could have been, like... No, honestly, like, in her mid-20s would probably be about right. So, yeah, that's Bonnie's, like, actual age. And Kuma is her father. And then at some point, you know, he went to the Revolutionary Army, but then he also went to Vegapunk. And Bonnie is here basically like, I'm going to talk to Vegapunk. I want to see what that asshole did to my father. And if I don't like his response, I'll murder him right here where he stands. You know, that kind of situation. So it implies... First of all, Bonnie has been here before. So Bonnie, being a member of the... Okay, hold on. There's so many things going on right now. Okay. Kuma used to be the king of the Sorbet Kingdom. He was Bonnie's father, which means it would make sense when Bonnie transforms into an old lady that she was mistaken for Connie, not because she was Connie, but because Connie's probably her mother's name. So Kuma and Connie were probably the king and queen of the Sorbet Kingdom, and then Connie might still actually be there right now as an old lady, as the Queen Dowager. She's probably still ruling the kingdom right now, or I guess there's somebody else ruling the kingdom, because Queen Dowager, you know, literally means not a queen that's actively ruling. Queen Regent, it means that you're actually ruling, okay? So, yeah, that's the situation with that. So, that means she went out to sea to go and save her father. She did have a relationship with Vegapunk. She did meet him and know him before, but I guess it's because they're royalty, because nobody can just go meet Vegapunk. Going to meet Vegapunk, who's this great scientist, is a big deal, you know what I mean? So, the way she's talking about it, maybe... when she was a little kid, so maybe, you know, she met Vegapunk like 20 years ago, roughly, around there, so to speak. And in those 20 years, Vegapunk turned this small little island into this massive thing. That kind of lines up from what we understand with his past, because he was a member of MADS, and then MADS got busted up, and then he went to go work for the government, Queen went to go work for Kaido, and Judge went to go to the Germa, right? So I thought that took place around 30 years ago. Queen and Judge are about the same age. They're like in their mid-50s. I thought Vegapunk was way older, which he still probably is. So maybe like 30 years ago, 25 years ago or something, Mads got busted, and then Vegapunk went to go work for the government, and they gave him Egghead Island as just a regular base of operations, but then over the last 2 decades, Vegapunk has been building it up to like a futuristic Tomorrowland. You know what I mean? So it could be a situation like that. But yeah, Kuma is Bonnie's father. I looked at this from a lot of different angles, and I don't think I ever arrived at that conclusion. So that was the twist right there. Okay. So, Bonnie's out for a little bit of a vendetta against Vegapunk here, because she has no idea what was going on. Jinbei thinks that that's awful, you know, the idea of taking your humanity away from you. You know, Jinbei looks audibly and visually very pissed off at that, like, what? How dare he? That monster! You know, given the fact, you know, Jinbei and Fishman and Merfolk dealing with slavery their entire lives, the idea of literally taking away someone's, like even their own mind is not theirs anymore, you know, is to something taken by the Tenryubito and the government. You can imagine Jinbei would also have a word or two to say to Vegapunk about this situation, right? Chopper and Luffy are just still kind of like, yeah, whatever, Bogey, it's Bonnie, whatever. So they begin climbing up one of the manhole covers, and they pop out into the actual, there's a city, a futuristic Tomorrowland city of Egghead Island. I keep mentioning Tomorrowland, the movie with George Clooney. I never watched it. It really didn't look that good. But the basic aesthetic is there. They walk into a futuristic crazy... Imagine like, Okay, you know how like back in the 1950s they would have like diagrams like this is what the world will look like in the year 2000, and it had like rocket ships and like the Jetsons. The Jetsons is like another example. The Jetsons was obviously not in the 1950s, that was a little later, but basically like that, like these crazy over-the-top buildings that are like floating and people are flying around and everybody has a personal jetpack, you know, or something like that. It's kind of like the Jetsons crossed with Tomorrowland, crossed with Retroland from the Adventures of Jimmy Neutron. You know, just combine all those together and you get Egghead Island, which means it looks amazing. So I also love the juxtapositioning here of, in one arc, we just got done with like Edo period Japan and like samurai and like traditional Japanese architecture, and Oda's like, all right, that's really cool. Now we're going to the future, baby. You know what I mean? Maybe a little bit of space dandy in there too. Stay dandy, baby. Yeah, all right. So they show up in this place and it looks incredible. Like, it looks like amazing. Like, we see things floating. There's like bubble houses, like little bubble domes and houses. On the top, we see like fish flying in the sky, and we see this big logo for SSG. SSG, of course, being the special science group that was developed by Vegapunk to replace the warlords. And also, remember, there's a giant egg, like dome on top of the island. I think that's where Vegapunk's main lab or like observatory is. So when they look up and they see this giant thing that says SSG, it might actually be like the entrance to the egg, you know, so keep that in mind. There's also a giant space alien monster, like attacking a giant robot, like in the middle of the city. And of course, that's the first thing Luffy picks up on. He's just like, oh my god, a giant alien snake! I'm gonna go fight it! And he just Gumu Gumu no rockets into the giant alien snake.
Okay, I'm just going to pause this really quick, editing Tekking here. So something I forgot to bring up in the review is that as Luffy is Gumu Gumu no rocketing into the giant alien snake, Bonnie does mention that she actually met Sabo during Reverie, so she knows a little bit about what happened to Sabo. Maybe not everything, but she knows a little bit. However, since Luffy is currently preoccupied with, you know, rocketing into the giant alien snake, she mentions that she'll bring it up later. So, you know, I'll spill the beans later. So it's like something I forget to bring up, but yeah, she does know stuff about Sabo. We just don't find out about it in this chapter.
But he passes right through it. He just shoop, and then he lands, and he's just like, what? I landed right through it. What the hell just happened? So he hits the ground. He's like, okay. And the next thing that happens is they look over and they see a giant pile of ice cream. Just a huge pile of ice cream just in the middle of the street. And they're just like, giant ice cream? Okay. And then they Bonnie as well, because Bonnie's also a glutton. So Bonnie, Chopper, and Luffy are just like jumping into the food, but it's also not really there. It's a hologram, but Luffy and Chopper, they have no idea what a hologram is. They like, this is crazy. I love this. This really focuses on the anachronistic technology in the One Piece world, where at the beginning of One Piece, like way back in like the East Blue, it seemed like a standard like pirate adventure in like the 16th century or something, right? Like it's the 1500s, we have wooden sailing ships, we'll head out to sea. And then as the story progresses, we get more and more anachronistic technology. We get things like electricity and refrigerators, but then eventually we get to like sea trains, like steam locomotives at Water 7, and then it seems like because the world is so spaced apart, every island sort of has their own speed of technological development, and Vegapunk is well beyond everybody. Vegapunk's like 5 centuries in the future, okay? So, you know, we have one island in the east that's just like, I'm just a humble little farmer living in the east, and then now we have holographic technology and like conveyor belts and all that kind of crap, you know, future land, all right? I just love it, okay? By the way, I have to feel bad for Jinbei here because Bonnie, Luffy, and Chopper are both all like, they love food and sweets and everything, so they keep jumping around like, we gotta eat food! Jinbei, I get, is like the dad that's taking his like kids to an amusement park, and he's just like a single dad and he has to like rein them all in. He's just like, all right, kids, welcome to the amusement park. Put on your armbands so you don't, oh, come on. No, Luffy, get over it. Luffy, Bonnie, no, Chopper, get away from the ice cream. Oh, it's gonna be all, if you're gonna be like this, we're gonna go back in the car right now. Oh my god. So yeah, you have to feel bad for Jinbei right now. Okay, Jinbei's just off to the side like, wait, maybe you guys shouldn't, and just like, whatever. So Luffy and Chopper have no idea what this is. Like, they literally have no concept of a hologram. Not something they have ever encountered. Luffy grew up in a damn mountain village raised by mountain bandits in the mountains. Okay, he has no idea what a damn hologram is, okay? So, Chopper, same thing. Chopper grew up in the middle of the mountains of, the Drum Island or whatever, the Drum Rockies, and he's a reindeer. So, they keep trying to eat the ice cream. Like, they are really pissed. They're, like, getting mad. They're just like, what? Why can't I eat the damn cherry? And so at this point, Jinbei is like, well, wait a second, I think, I've never seen one myself, but I think this might be one of them holograms. Right, yeah. Now, this does kind of make sense that Jinbei would know about this, because Jinbei did, I mean, he's older than the rest, but also he's, been a part of the government. He might know a little bit about what Vegapunk's been up to, okay? So he's like, yeah, I heard, like, holograms exist. Also, that reminds me of, she's a non-canon character. Her name is Anne, not the Anne from Romance Dawn version 2, who is the stand-in for Nami, which, by the way, man, Nami would have looked awesome with blue hair, right? Anyway, no, this Anne, that actually appears in Stampede. She has the power of the Bijo no Mi, which is a devil fruit that creates, like, holograms and illusions. She appears as, like, the One Piece tower attraction, okay, like in real life. Anyway, at the end of Stampede, she uses her illusion powers, her hologram powers, to create an image of Ace, and so that's how the movie ends, with Sabo and Ace, like, standing next to each other and, like, creating a fire route for the Straw Hats to escape, okay? So, kind of similar to that ability, but it's like actual holograms. Bonnie has actually explained, she knows what they are. She's like, oh, it's basically like a bending of light in like 3 dimensions that you can't actually interact with. So Bonnie knew what it was. She just got so excited by the giant pile of ice cream that she's like, oh! He's like, oh wait, it's a hologram. And so Luffy actually looks like he's about to go into Gear 5th, where his hair begins to stand up and he has the ribbon appearing. Like, Luffy is about to go into his awakening because this is fake holographic ice cream. Baby. Holographic meatloaf again. You know what I mean? So, this is one thing. You do not mess with Luffy and food, okay? You want Luffy to defeat anybody in this entire story, take away Luffy's food. Have a giant meal. This is how Luffy can defeat Blackbeard. This is real. Have a giant table filled with Luffy's favorite foods. And and have him not eat for like an hour beforehand. And he's like, I really need this food. And it's all there. And he's right about to eat. And right before it touches his tongue, Blackbeard absorbs all of it with Black Vortex. Like, say ha ha ha! Oh my god, Blackbeard would be so dead, it wouldn't even be funny, okay? It wouldn't even be a freaking battle. It would be half of a chapter, okay? There you go. Anyway, so, they begin to realize, like, wait a second, okay, I jumped through it. That means the giant alien snake was a hologram. The giant robot fighting the giant snake is a hologram. Kind of like in Back to the Future Part 2 when Marty sees Jaws 15, like, Donna. Shark still looks fake, kind of like that. They mention that, like, oh yeah, nobody could actually build a giant robot the size of, like, a skyscraper. No one can actually have a giant alien snake. You don't know about Vegapunk. I think Vegapunk took that to be a challenge, you know what I mean? All right. So next, they walk over to a machine that looks like a giant vending machine that has like a bunch of different pictures of food on it. Now this is reminding me of Idiocracy. There's so many references in this chapter. Do you love this? I love this, okay? Remember Idiocracy? Where they're like walking around the city and there's like a vending machine for food and it's just like, welcome to Carl's Jr. Would you like to try the extra big ass taco? And it's like you just push the picture. You have selected extra big ass taco. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. I love this shit. All right. Jinbei brings up the climate of the island. He's just like, hey, wait a second. Wasn't it like super cold and freezing outside? Now it's like warm and really nice outside. At that moment, we then have another character that appears. Luffy mentions that this girl that walks over to them is about the size of Kaido. She's really big. To me, it kind of looks like a character that would be out of like Astro Boy, which obviously Astro Boy, very old manga, one of the first like very, very popular mangas from way back in like, I don't remember. I mean, the anime was old. I mean, to give you an idea of how old the Astro Boy anime is, the original was in black and white, okay? So we're talking like at least in the 60s, maybe the 50s. Not a huge fan of Astro Boy, but a lot of mangakas have like, used Astro Boy as like, their inspiration, because it's like one of the first ones ever, right? And so Oda probably is the same way. So this looks like a character out of Astro Boy to me. It's a girl. She walks over. She has 2 toned hair, like black and white. She has a jetpack on her back. She has fancy future boots, and she has punk number. Her number actually is weird. I think it says 6, but later on she might be 5. It's weird. It's like a little bit of an inconsistency, so we'll get to that. But she walks over and she begins to explain to the group that she's like, oh yes, the island, that's the island-wide aircon system. The island aircon. Aircon, air conditioning, is like how they say it in Japan, where they have the air units in like individual apartments and stuff like that. And so she's just like, yes, the island aircon system. It's set to tropical right now, and it heats everything in the island all the way down to the soil. So it's not even like, she's just mentions that the island's climate above ground is changed or whatever. No, it literally permeates the very ground itself. So you could probably plant things now. It is a tropical environment. Also explains probably why that giant sea current was outside the island, that warm eddy, probably because they're messing with the temperature. As I talked about this in the review last week, and also in a video this week, because it's been 2 weeks since the last chapter, is that the whole deal with Baltimore was that Vegapunk was attempting in his youth trying to make an island-wide heating apparatus, but he failed. It makes sense that he would have probably worked on that, because he's never really good with failure. He has really high standards as a scientist, so he's just like, I need to perfect this island heating device, and he finally managed to do it here at Egghead, okay? Luffy tries to punch her because Luffy's just like, oh, that's great. Is this one a hologram, whatever you call it, too? And he just goes to punch this kid. I mean, giant kid, probably a robot, but still a kid. Come on, Luffy. Punches her, and then she's just like, take this! Boom! And then smacks Luffy right into the vending machine, and Luffy lands into the vending machine. It's like, pop! Extra, ultra, big-ass hamburger. And then the hamburger meal, is dispensed, bun, condiment. There you go. And so they begin to eat the food from the vending machine, all right? So, yeah, Bonnie and Luffy and Chopper, they finally get their meal. I think Jinbei's enjoying it a little bit as well. She's like, oh, steak, omurice, oh, tonkatsu, cotton candy, cake. It's just like beep, beep, boop, boop, beep. It's kind of like a, not exactly like a, what's it called in Star Trek? I'm not a huge Star Trek fan. What's it called? The thing! The replicator, that's it, the replicator. It's kind of like that, but not really, because the way that, her name, by the way, is Atlas. I'm just gonna go ahead with, it's not revealed yet, but it just makes it easier. So Atlas is the kid's name, the giant Kaido-sized kid. And so she mentions it's called the unmanned cooking device, okay? And so it's like, it takes a bunch of raw ingredients, so it's not really a replicator that's just like creating it out of nothing. It's taking like a bunch of raw ingredients in the machine and just and then combining them together to make the food, any kind of food that you want at any given time. She also mentions there's a mode called, make do with what you got mode, which basically probably just takes a bunch of random stuff and makes it into a bunch of random stuff, like hamburger pizza, or steak tonkatsu, or whatever. Like, it just modifies and just melds a bunch of different kinds of food. And she's like, oh, that mode is the best. You gotta try that out. But then her personality immediately flips, and she gets really frustrated all of a sudden. She's like, yeah, this is a great device. It can just make any food you want, except all the freaking people can't replicate it because the blueprints are too damn complicated and we don't have enough resources and funding in order to mass produce this product. So she gets really mad about that. And she's just like, yeah, and then she goes up and punches the giant alien snake. The giant alien snake that was a hologram. This lady, Atlas, jumps up and just decks the thing. And it's like, whoa! And then the snake falls down. And then, they're like, and she goes on and says that, like, it's the same thing with the island aircon system. It can monitor living creatures around the island, so you know when sea kings are approaching. It can help, grow crops and everything. The weather is at your command, but we just can't replicate it. It takes too much resources to do. Vegapunk is feeling frustrated because his genius is so much better than everybody else's. He's so far ahead of everyone's time that literally the world cannot keep up. So it's not possible to mass produce or replicate his inventions because just nobody else understands how they work. And even if they did know how they work, it's like there's a lack of resources in order to get there, okay? So he can make one of these like magic unmanned food devices. He can make one island aircon, fine, but it can't be spread all over the world, and that's the thing that's really making him, like, irritated right now, okay? And we see that through Atlas, okay? One of his satellite bodies, all right? So, yeah, now before we continue on, I just want to bring up the hold on. Let me just go grab it really quick. It's right over here. Yeah, one of my favorite manga of all time is, Dr. Stone by Riichiro Inagaki, right? Okay. And art by Boichi. Great manga. Just wrapped up this year. Go check it out. But anyway, kind of a similar thing with this because Senku, the main character right here, Senku is like a brilliant scientist that knows like everything about the 21st century, and he gets sent, you know, well, not sent, it's the whole plot of Dr. Stone, but basically he has to build up the entire world from nothing. Like, it's like back in like a time where before humans or whatever, it's in the future, but whatever. And it's like, okay, he's like, okay, I have access to all this technology. Like, Senku knows how to build a computer. He knows how to build a cell phone. He knows how to do all this, except he's in the woods, out in the middle of nowhere. He can't just immediately jump to it. So that's a theme throughout the story. It's just like, man, I want to get to this point, but we have like a million other steps to get through before we can build smartphones, before we can build televisions, before we can do the internet or whatever. So it's kind of like that. Now imagine this. Now imagine this on Vegapunk's scale, where he's thinking of things 500 years ahead of even like our time. Imagine if like there's somebody in our world that figured out light speed travel or warp drive or whatever, like some Star Trek science fiction shit. Like, I discovered warp drive. I know the exact calculation on how to do warp drive. I know how to build an engine. Here's how you build it. Here you go. It'd be like, this makes no sense. I'm like, this is requiring resources we don't have enough of on this planet. The cost of this would be in the trillions. Like, yeah, but this is a warp engine. Like, we can't do this. It's just impractical in our time period. You know, that's how frustrated, you know, that person would be. Same thing with Vegapunk here, okay? Basic idea. Okay, but Atlas, back to her. She punched a hologram, so how do you do that? Well, I'll tell you how to do that. You do that when you have the photonic glove attachment. That's when you do that. So she lifts up her gauntlet, like her gloved hand, and it like sparks. It's like, these are the photonic gloves. With these, I can even punch and interact with light. Okay, pause for a moment, pause for a moment, pause for a moment. There's an invention in the One Piece world that allows someone to physically interact and punch light. I wonder if that will be at all relevant with dealing with one of the strongest Logia fruits in the entire story that literally allows you to transform and manipulate light. Maybe it might have something to do with that, so pay attention. Vegapunk might give the Straw Hats a power-up in this arc, and one of the power-ups might be the damn light gauntlet things, alright? Now, with these things, you could give these to Sanji. You could have Sanji strap on some photonic boots or shoes or whatever, and he could be kicking the shit out of Kizaru. Yeah, that could be happening, right? You could give an attachment to Zoro's sword. Zoro could, like, slice apart Kizaru's light. That might be the only way to deal with him, with science, because Kizaru, like, even if you have Haki, the dude is so ridiculously powerful. He has Haki too. You need sort of like an underhanded tactic. I don't know if you consider this an underhanded tactic. He's using light as a weapon. That's kind of unfair, all right? I think it could be balanced out by using the photonic glove shit, all right? Well, anyway, there's a holographic lady that just walks down the street. I guess all the citizens of this town are just holograms, right? I can't imagine a lot of people, like normal people, are just living here. This is like a secret government operation with like the scientists and everything. So a hologram lady's just walking down the street, and Atlas like high-fives her with the gauntlets. Like, see, I can even interact with light now. And Luffy's like still stuffing his face, and he's just like, oh, wait a second, so... Wait, if you can interact with her, that means the girl is real? Or is she a hologram? I'm confused. I'm eating more food. Leave it to Luffy to ask one of the most complicated, like, philosophical questions that, you know, humans have been dealing with since, like, the times of, like, the Greeks and the Romans and shit. Like, is that girl real? Is that, well, not that specific. Is that girl real? Like, that's another question altogether. Like, that's like a catfishing kind of thing. But, is that person real? Is that, what is real? What qualifies as real, right? Now, Atlas responds to this by saying, debates on what makes something real and not real are as old as time itself. It is something I have already come to terms with. You have to decide with on your own. So it's important to mention, she does not, and then Jinbei changes the conversation after this. So Atlas does not go on to explain, like, what Vegapunk's perspective is on what is real and what isn't real. Atlas implies that Vegapunk has already come to that conclusion. Like, Vegapunk already arrived at it, and it's a philosophical question, really. So it's just like, what is real, what isn't real, what decides real? Is real that something subjective or objective to, is it something with our own perspective that is real? Like, if we see something, do we know that it's real? If we don't see something, like, I'm not looking at my laptop right now, so is my laptop real? Like, what is real? It's a very deep philosophical question. which is why I have this giant philosophy book over here. But more importantly, back to the apple. See, the apple now comes in handy. Now, this is something I'm just going to breeze through really quick. I've actually talked about this before, believe it or not. There was a video I did years ago on Sword Art Online, of all things, that I talked about this. But I have this, like, perspective on, like, what is real and what isn't real, or what, like, you can see as real, okay? So, let me ask you a question. If you have an apple, this would make it even better if you can go get an apple. If you have apples, go grab an apple. Seriously, this will be an experiment. This is a thought experiment. It'll blow your mind. Okay, really, just go grab an apple if you have an apple. All right, so, okay, got your apple? Okay, cool. All right, how do you know this apple is real? Just simple, I'm not trying to trick you. Just, like, how do you know this apple is real? I would say I know this apple is real because all the senses that I have are telling me that this is a physical apple that I'm holding. My sense of touch, I can touch this apple, I can see the apple with my eyes, I can hear the apple, you know, apple makes a sound. I know what an apple is because I've had apples before, I've seen them, although that leads into a whole other philosophical question of, like, how do you know something? That's something Plato talked about with, like, the ideal version of things, and then Aristotle was completely like, no, it's not about that, it's oh my god, Plato's philosophy I still can't wrap my head around. Aristotle's makes a lot more sense to me, but Plato's is just like, I don't get what he was going at. I really need to look more into his stuff, okay? And then Socrates was just walking around asking questions at everybody. But anyway, yeah, so, you know, I could see the apple, I could taste the apple. Tastes like an apple. It has a smell. I can smell the apple, okay? Since because all my senses, all my main senses, I'd have more than 5, but 5 main senses are telling me, hey, this is an apple, I can tell this is an apple. However, what if, and this is where the Sword Art Online discussion came into being with, like, the full dive tech, like the full VR and everything. What would happen if humanity ever developed VR that was completely immersive, that can copy your actual senses, like 100% flawlessly? So let's say I'm in a video game, like The Matrix or something, and I have an apple in the video game, and the video game was able to process the senses of this apple in the exact same way. Like, I'm in the video game, I can still touch the apple, I can see it, smell it, taste it, hear it, all that kind of stuff. Even though it's just an apple in a video game, made up of, like, code and everything, to me, the person that's actually holding it and eating it, and spitting it out, it would still be the same, you know? Like, if this was, like, the most realistic video game ever right now, and I don't believe that, but if it was, how would I know the difference? So the way I look at what is real and what isn't real is the way that I personally can perceive of it. And if the way I can perceive of it is seamless the same way with real and not real, then not real becomes real. Do you kind of see where I'm going with here? Does this make any sense to you? Maybe not. I don't know. I might just be spouting nonsense here. But that's the way I kind of look at it. So we don't actually know. I don't even know if Oda's going to go more into this debate because it is like a philosophical kind of thing. It might just be like, keep it simple. I'm going to choke on this apple in a second here. Okay, hold on. Okay, I'm good. So, yeah, I think we're just gonna move on from this whole discussion about real and, like, existentialism and everything like that, and, you know, existence itself. And, you know, go pick up a philosophy book or something if you want to know a little bit more about other people's take on this. Literally has been a question people have been asking for thousands of years. Anyway, so Jinbei kind of changes the topic away from philosophy and just says, well, okay, well, who are you then? Asking Atlas. And Atlas says, this is where we find out her actual name. Me, I'm just your resident scientist. Scientific genius for hire, Dr. Vegapunk. And it says well, we see on her dress it has number 6, and then it says Vegapunk Atlas, wrath, representing wrath. So Lilith was evil, and Shaka was logic, Atlas is wrath. And we saw that with, like, the frustrations on, like, damn it, I can't mass produce my technological genius! Boom! I'm just punching things, okay? So yeah. Other than that, she seems pretty humble. It's sort of the same thing that Lilith said. Lilith came out of the giant robot in the last chapter and was just like, I'm just a scientist for hire despite my mediocrity. And then Atlas is saying, oh, I'm just your resident scientific genius. You know, so there's a little bit of, like, downplaying Vegapunk's, like, awesomeness. Like, Vegapunk is this genius scientist way ahead of his time, and yet he's introducing himself, or his satellites are introducing themselves as, like, yes, I'm just your humble scientific genius just living here. So it's sort of like a humble brag sort of situation. I don't know. Anyway, so there's that. Bonnie recognizes immediately this is not Vegapunk. Last time I was here, Vegapunk was not a giant girl. Something's going on here. Meanwhile, though, Luffy and Chopper have no frame of reference, so they're stuffing their faces and they're beginning to choke, and they're like, Vegapunk, I know that guy! I've heard that name before. Kobe told me about you. I'm surprised that, wait, did Kobe talk? Yeah, Kobe did mention it. Yeah, Kobe did mention it to Luffy way back in Eddie's lobby. I'm surprised Luffy remembers stuff half the time. Anyway, so that's the introduction to Atlas. Okay, so we know 3 so far of Vegapunk's satellites. Now, we cut to the last scene of the chapter. Outside of the island altogether, we're just at a random point in the New World where a world government ship is sailing, and it's sailing toward Egghead Island. On the ship is Cypher Pole Zero, Rob Lucci, Stussy, and Kaku. And so they're all hanging out at a table. They're all drinking tea. We have their masks there because the Cypher Pole Zero wear masks. We actually saw Lucci's mask way back in Dressrosa. Kaku has a mask that actually adapts to his nose, so it kind of defeats the purpose. So he has a mask that has to go over his nose. And Stussy has a mask as well. Stussy, same thing. Anyway, so they're sitting there talking about their job, what they have to do. And so Kaku is trying to explain to Lucci, because I guess Lucci was like, all right, we're sent to assassinate Vegapunk. All right, we get to the island, we find the old man, Shigon, and then call it a day. And Kaku's like, no, Lucci, listen to me. It's going to be more complicated than that, okay? This is going to be more complicated than other jobs we've done, all right? Vegapunk is literally this really, he says busy as a beaver here. The actual idiom in Japanese, as the translator note mentions, is that it's about cats. So the same general idea, like busy as a beaver or busy as a bee, and there's a version of it in Japanese that's about cats, okay? So it's like, Vegapunk is really, really busy. And so because he's so busy and he can't work on every project at once, he's made a bunch of robotic, satellite bodies, as Kaku calls them, and there's 6 of them, and they all kind of have their own individuality and their own personality and their own tasks and their own jobs, and they go out throughout the island, okay? And we see a chart of them and what they are all called, okay? So number 1 is Shaka, logic. Number 2 is Lilith, evil. Number 3 is Edison, flair, or creativity. Number 4 is Pythagoras. Hold on a second. Pythagoras, or wisdom. Number 5, see, this is where it gets confusing, because number 5 is listed, and there's even a translator note about this. Number 5 is listed as Atlas, wrath. Except when we saw Atlas, she had a 6 on her dress. So either Oda's going to change the number on her dress from 6 to 5, or switch these around in here. Something in the Tankobon version is going to have to change, because there's obviously a mix-up here. But it's not like a huge deal. It's just like a mix-up in the numbers. And then finally, number 6 on this piece of paper is yoke, or desire. I think it's yoke. Yeah, yoke, or desire. Okay. So he's like, and then there's the main body, Dr. Vegapunk, and so he makes a little chart, okay? And then so he's like, this is actually how it works. And then Rob Lucci's there, and he's just like, man, like, why can't this be simple? Why can't he just be one person? We gotta kill 7 people now? Come on, this is bullshit. So Rob Lucci is just like, geniuses are such a pain. I just love having Rob Lucci back. Rob Lucci might be the main villain of this arc, so we might have a Luffy versus Lucci rematch. I'm really excited for that, okay? So anyway, the camera pans back a bit, and we see there's also a Seraphim sitting with them at the table, and it's a Seraphim of Kuma. So we see Chibi, relative to Kuma's actual size, Chibi child Kuma sitting at the table with the Lunarian wings, actually, he doesn't have white hair. Wait, did the other Seraphim have white hair? Yeah, they did, right? Yeah. The Boa Hancock Seraphim had white hair, right? Yeah, well, this one doesn't. Anyway, dressed like Kuma with the jacket, except there's a star symbol on the jacket like the other Seraphim or whatever. Or actually, we're more like the other Vegapunk robots he has, right? And so Lucci mentions, like, okay, in short, our assignment is to return this problem child back to Egghead, and then we'll take care not to damage any of the island's assets, but then we do have to assassinate Vegapunk. And so Lucci is kind of confused a little bit, but he's a hand of the Tenryubito. He's a member of CP0. He does what he's told. But he's just like, it seems like a waste to just kill the single most important genius in the entire world. It seems a little strange. He's like, I wonder if the government thinks that he knows too much. I wonder if the Gorosei are a little bit too worried about what Vegapunk knows. And then to that, Stussy and Kaku kind of shoot Lucci down. They're kind of just like, hey, Lucci, don't get us in trouble. Don't bring us into this. You know full well we were given this job. We don't ask questions. We just do it. Don't raise any questions. And this also leads back to Lucci. Like, remember at the end of like Enies Lobby and the whole CP9 independent report, the idea was that Lucci and the rest of CP9 were like more independent. They were leaving the government and going off and doing their own thing. And now 2 years later, they're now listening directly to Tenryubito. So something happened, and I'm very interested in learning about what happened in the 2-year time skip between the Cypherpole sailing off to make their own destiny and now working directly for the people they were leaving. Okay, so something had to happen here. And so maybe they're like double crossing or triple crossing the government, who knows. But Lucci is still, he's asking questions that a Cypherpole Zero should not be asking, like, seems like kind of weird that we're sent to kill the most important scientist in the world. Strange. Maybe the government's hiding something. And then Kaku's like, and Stussy's like, don't say anything. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we'll see what happens. And then the chapter ends there. No break next week. Okay. So, yeah, and Lucci even brings up, I wonder if it has something to do with the recent Leloucia incident. So, Vegapunk is either aware of the giant laser weapon that destroyed Leloucia, and I've personally never even heard of Leloucia. I don't know what that is. I don't know what you're talking about, Lucci. Lucci, shut up, man, shut up. But no, so that item, that weapon, it might have been Uranos, it might have been the ancient weapon, or it might have been a device created by Vegapunk. It might have been a copy of the ancient weapon by Vegapunk. He's already been copying Devil Fruits. He's been copying, cloning freaking, Warlord DNA and Lunarians and combining those together. So the idea that maybe he tried to create a fake ancient weapon, and that's Uranos, and like the real Uranos is like even bigger and could destroy like the entire world or something. That might be a situation. And so maybe the government's like, yeah, we got to get rid of Vegapunk, so we're going to make him build all these amazing things for us. Then we're going to kill him. And it was even mentioned that, like, do not damage the island's stuff. Maybe the government decided, just like the sunk cost fallacy or whatever, maybe the government just decided at this point, like, you know what? We've had Vegapunk building stuff for us for like decades. He has all these we have pacifistas, we have giant robots, we have, the sea prism coding, we have all this stuff with like devil fruit technology. We have the Seraphim now. We have all this crap. Maybe it was with the Seraphim that they realized, like, holy shit, if Vegapunk wanted to, he can make an entire robot army and like take over the government. Kind of like Metal Knight in One Punch Man. So maybe the government at this point, the Gorosei realizing, like, wait a second, this guy's too dangerous. Let's just eliminate him, and we'll still have all of his stuff. You know what I mean? Like, he won't be making new stuff, but the stuff he's already given us will probably give the government the ability to rule over the world for hundreds of years to come. Eliminating Vegapunk as a genius is a problem, but like, we already have the laser robots. We already have the Seraphim. We already have the Sea Prism. We already have all this stuff. You know what I mean? We already have the ancient giant weapon that can obliterate islands, so get rid of him, and then we're still going to be on top for quite some time. So maybe that might be the logic. Who knows? But yeah, so going back to the different bodies of Vegapunk, I don't understand all of the references to them. There's actually a nice handy little translation page on the TCB on the website if you want to go look at that and like the actual explanation on everything there. The one I'm going to majorly focus on, I already talked about Lilith. I don't know what Shaka's in reference to. Edison, obviously in reference to Thomas Edison, who perfected the filament, the carbon filament for a light bulb. Correct? Because here's the thing. When I was a kid growing up, I was always told, I think even by like my teachers growing up, that like Edison did not invent the light bulb. It was Nikola Tesla that invented the light bulb. And that was something that I had in my head for years. Like Nikola Tesla, Nikola Tesla invented the light bulb. Okay, if you ever actually have sat down and read about the history of the light bulb, which I have, working at Dollar Tree was very boring. Some nights I would just pull out a Wikipedia article and read the whole thing. Why do you think Animal Facts started? I was just spending the whole time just reading about ants and bats one day. Anyway, one day I'm bored at Dollar Tree, so I just pull up the Wikipedia article for the history of the incandescent light bulb and just like read about that for like 45 minutes, okay? So, if I am correct, Nikola Tesla had actually very few, if not anything, really, contributions directly to the incandescent light bulb. Nikola Tesla worked on a lot of stuff, like, the AC current, the alternating current, like, induction motor. That was his big thing. But in terms of working directly on the light bulb, I don't think Nikola Tesla did a lot of this. Now, as for Edison, because Edison is often, like, said, like, oh, he didn't invent that, a bunch of other people invented that. Dude, if you've actually gone back and read the history of the light bulb, which I do not recommend highly enough, people have been working on this for hundreds of years. It's a collaborative thing, like back in the 1700s, there was even a dude. I can't remember his name. It was like Ebenezer something. I remembered his name was like Ebenezer because Ebenezer Scrooge. But way back in like the 1700s, there was a dude that like took a wire and just heated it up, and then he proved that if you heat up a wire high enough, it makes it incandescent. It makes it glow. So that's kind of where like the beginning idea of a light bulb started way back in like the 18th century. Okay, and then many scientists throughout the centuries made like they were mixing with the filaments. Like maybe we can use platinum for the filament. When we're going to use carbon for the filament, we got to perfect the carbon. There was a bunch of different patents for a light bulb long before Edison even came into the play. Sometimes the patents were mass produced, sometimes they weren't, sometimes it's whatever. And then finally it arrives at the end point, which was Edison, who, you know, yeah, he didn't like create the light bulb from scratch, but it's just like, this is the finished product. This is the light bulb that, you know, was the precursor to every light bulb. Well, we don't really use the same as anymore, but you know what I mean. So yeah, that's Edison. Then we have Pythagoras, who's famous for the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras was born in Greece back in, it was before Socrates. Socrates was like in the 400s BC, Plato was like from the 400s to the 300s, and then Aristotle was after Plato in the 300s BC, because Aristotle's the one that actually taught Alexander the Great, and that was all in the Macedonian Empire, that was all in the 300s BC. Pythagoras, I think, was at the 500s BC, at the very end or the beginning of the he died in 495 BC, that was it, okay. So, Pythagoras, though, one of those Greek philosophers that never wrote anything down. Same thing with Socrates. Socrates never actually taught in he never built a school. He never wrote any of his stuff down. That was all Plato that had the stuff later. Same thing with Pythagoras. Pythagoras never wrote anything down. He loved to study geometry and math, which was a relatively new field at that point. And, you know, in the Pythagorean theorem and everything, discovering, like, right angles and, like, how geometry really works. And he kind of realized that, like, wait a second, geometry is everything. Can you imagine somebody going around in the ancient world declaring that, like, geometry is everything, math is everything? It'd be weird, right? By the way, geography is everything. Anyway, no, but honestly, like talking real right now, geography is not everything. Math is truly everything, because literally every aspect of the universe can be calculated with math or understood with math, okay? And Pythagoras was one of the first people to understand this. Now, math was clearly something that existed before Pythagoras, okay? The existence of the pyramids in Egypt clearly indicate the Egyptians were very advanced and they understood the ratio enough to build a pyramid to begin with architecture, okay? Which is also explaining why Pythagoras studied in Egypt at the time, because it was like a hub of scientific learning during his day. So Pythagoras, though, he really delved into this whole thing, and he discovered like what right angles really are and how math really correlates to like everything and how you can really kind of understand the universe. To the point where, I'm not shitting you, if you haven't read anything about Pythagoras, Pythagoras literally started like a mathematical geometry cult, and they were called the Pythagoreans, and I'm not even shitting you. And he revealed like, this is what geometry is like, behold, my followers. The triangle. Oh my God, he's a prophet from on high! Maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but that was essentially what Pythagoras did. And he lived in Italy for a time, and he set up this kind of like group in southern Italy, and he didn't write anything down, so that was all his followers. So a lot of the stuff we know about Pythagoras' life is from his followers, you know, that were writing stuff down about him way later. But anyway, yeah, Pythagoras was like, yeah, he came up with this idea, but he also came up with, what was it called? Law of octaves, I think, which helped like way later discover like the periodic table. Like he laid the groundwork for a lot of this stuff. He basically invented deductive reasoning. So fascinating dude, but a little crazy. You know, and just the idea that he discovered like math. He was the first person to really crack the code on like geometry. And because he discovered like what it really was, or one of the first people to discover what it really was, people thought that like this was like divine revelation, because this was at the moment when you were kind of leaving everything was created by gods, like in super antiquity, and you start moving into like Western philosophy stuff. Eastern philosophy was happening as well around the same time. Like this is around the same time Confucius lived. But anyway, you had this idea of like people beginning to really understand the universe. Like maybe not everything was created by gods and nothing. Maybe that the universe does actually make sense. And maybe through mathematics we can discover what it really is. So it would make sense that from everything was created by gods to science, in the middle, you would have people that sort of blend in both. And that was Pythagoras. So it's just like people looked at him like, math It's divine! You know, just like, you know, he clearly is sent from on high because he understands a damn triangle or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, so that's the thing, that's Pythagoras. And then Atlas, in Greek mythology, Atlas is the titan that has to hold up the sky. I often say Atlas holds up the earth. No, it's the sky, tasked by Zeus to do that. Shows up during, Heracles' labors. So there's Atlas, and then yolk is inside of an egg. That's a yolk. All right, well, anyway, I feel like I've talked enough and gone on enough tangents today. There will be a lot of follow-up videos about this week. We got a lot of stuff to unpack with this, so that's just the initial stuff. This video is well over an hour long already, so I'm going to get going, but thanks you all for watching. This will be Tekking, signing out. Enjoy your apples. Bye.